Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the summit. How has it been going for you? I truly hope that this is helping you to grow your faith and understand why it's important for you to turn your tests, trials, and setbacks into purpose and how to begin to make that happen. And so, before we get started with our next interview, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping rules. Well, not housekeeping rules, but take care of some housekeeping stuff for you. So, again, my name is Aisha Taylor, and I help single moms to grow their faith, walk in purpose, and own their finances. And so, I'm super excited to be your host for this amazing summit. And the next thing I want to let you know is if you are having an amazing experience, which I know you are, then make sure you get your all access replay. And so the information to get your all access replay is going to be below this video. So make sure you grab your copy of your all access replay so that way you can hit pause, rewind, and take notes and rewatch as many times as you can to absorb this information so that way you can take it from knowledge, right, to implementation. And so, with that being said, I am super excited to welcome you to this session, which is called Live Your Best Life. And so, today I am with Dionne Nicholls, and we are going to be talking about purpose. And she is the founder of Live Your Best Life for You. So, welcome, Dionne.
Thank you for having me. Wow, I love the energy that's going on here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
just excited. Whenever I can talk to a single mom and help her to realize that God has a purpose and plan for her, I am excited because I know how it feels to not understand that and the difference that it's made in my life to be able to understand that and get that revelation.
Yes, feeling is mutual. So I'm honored.
Mhm. Yes. So to kick us off, can you just let us know more about who you are? I know I said your name and your company, but yeah, just let us know more about who you are and what you do and how you got to this place.
Sure. So, yeah, I am a mom of a 17-year-old. We're actually in the throes of the college process. So that's keeping me busy. Aside from that, as you said, I am the founder of a company called Live Your Best Life for You. And I get to work with busy moms who have a lot going on and still want more. And that's basically inspired by my own personal story of reinvention, that I believe
Mhm.
that basically any woman at any age, at any stage, can reinvent their life. So I'm also the creator of a program called The Reset, how to pivot from powerless to purpose. And I also do one-on-one, personal transformation coaching, group coaching, as well as executive coaching. I'm trying to get to women, female leaders, mothers around the world to believe that they can do anything they put their mind to. And in addition to that, I'm a big proponent of gratitude. So
Mm.
I'm actually also the brand ambassador for a company called Intelligent Change, and I spread the gospel around, the daily practice of gratitude using the 5 minute journal. So for women like us that don't have a whole lot of time, 5 minutes can
Mhm.
literally change your life. It changed mine. So yeah, that's just a bit about what I'm up to.
Absolutely. And I love how you talked about gratitude. Like recently, I actually taught a Bible study on Philippians 4, 6 through 7. But then I jumped up a little earlier when Paul starts off with rejoice. In all
Yes.
things, I say rejoice. And I'm like, that's really the fun, like the fundamental part of overcoming anxiety, overcoming anxiousness. And so I'm so happy that you actually talked about gratitude and
Yeah.
that is a big piece of the work that you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, God loves gratitude. And
Hmm.
I actually just came off doing a whole 3-part series about gratitude at the top of the year. And one of the topics was using gratitude to shift the mood. When you're in those moments of anxiety and overwhelm, how you can actually use gratitude just to recenter and regroup. And it's amazing what can take place. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I want to start. I know I sent you some questions in advance, but I tend to also freestyle. And when you started to talk about reinvention, knowing that the moms, helping the moms get more, I wanted to actually start there. So sometimes there are some barriers to us understanding that more is possible. What do you think are some of the biggest barriers that end up breaking people's beliefs that more is actually possible for them? I'm trying to get to, like, how do you even get to the place where you believe
Mhm.
more is important? Because when you've gone through certain trials and setbacks, and as a single mom, dealing with rejection and having to overcome rejection, that impacted my ability to even believe more was possible for me. So, what do you think are some of the barriers to believing that more is possible?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? So those traumas that we experience, right, end up shaping our belief system. They end up shaping how we're reacting to life, right? Those things actually become triggers. The way we were either spoken to, what we experienced now is shaping our world and the narration of our lives. And so that's one of the biggest barriers, actually, is the belief system. So it's what can we do to start countering those things, And a big part of it is who you surround yourself with is
Mhm.
huge. Who's pouring into you, and are they pouring into you in a way that is constructive, that's uplifting you, empowering you? Because if you have negative voices distracting you, yeah, it's hard to get back on track. So that's huge. um, Thankfully, I found my faith. you know we get to choose in every moment, faith or fear, or um, both require belief, but we get to choose. And I have found that the more I delved into my faith, whatever that spiritual practice is for you, for me it's God.
Mhm.
But the more time I spend in my word, um, the more I understand that that is the truth, despite whatever is happening in the world. That if I just follow his instructions, and these are literally the words that were given to me during the height of the pandemic, when my husband upped and abandoned me, was to keep my eyes on God. And the more I just did that, it's amazing, right? Because it's that idea of looking above the circumstance, right? And getting a wider view of what is available, what is possible. But when you're focused on the negativity, it's hard to see that there's anything else out there. So that's a big one too. So really tapping into your spirituality. Who are you surrounding yourself with? um, I would say are the two. I mean, there's so many more, but I would say those are two really important things, and seeking healing. I should say, I should
Mhm.
actually add that part. So actually seeking support, whatever that looks like for you, whether that is therapy, whether that is group coaching, but something that's going to help you get on your path to creating a new existence for yourself. It'll start with your actual healing. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that that's so important because we have to be able to get above the
Mhm.
situation. Because I remember when I was pregnant, I was 4 months pregnant, and my twin's dad walked out. I remember sitting there like, okay, like now what?
Mhm.
I'm pregnant. I had just quit my job to become a full-time entrepreneur. And then, this all kind of unfolds. And so you're right. It's so important to be able to get above the pain and focus on the healing, because I remember I would just sit in the darkest corner of the room, blinds closed, in a fetal position, rocking back and forth, crying. And the only thing that could come out of my mouth was Jesus at that time.
Mhm.
And but in that time, it's like at least I had that one name to
Yeah.
hold on to, because the more I ended up just saying, I cannot say anything else but Jesus, Jesus. But eventually I got the strength to be able to come out of that corner. And then eventually I got the strength to come out of the house and to be able to resume life, to figure out how to rebuild, how to reinvent, how can I move forward in spite of what all of this, how everything was going on. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, may I add something there? Because you brought
Mhm,
a really great point up, and I'm a firm believer in this as well,
mhm,
that uh, that your life is representative of your language,
mhm,
right? So we are very powerful beings when we speak out what we do want to create. But even if we don't have the words,
mhm,
you chose one word,
mhm,
but you spoke it out. And what is Jesus? Jesus is love. Jesus is peace.
mhm.
He's promise. Just you speaking out his name was able to bring you out of the darkness and into the light because you
Absolutely.
spoke it out, right? So how are we speaking to ourselves, and what are we speaking into the atmosphere can change anything.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I teach my kids all the time. So when I hear one of my kids doing homework and one of them is saying, "Oh, it's too hard. I can't do it." I said, "No, you are brilliant. God has given you a wonderful mind and a wonderful brain, and you can figure it out. It might be challenging right now, but you're smart enough and capable enough to rise to the challenge. So you can admit that it is challenging, but also admit that you have the ability to figure it out."
Yes, yes, yes. So there it is. There's a perfect example where the words spoken over him were empowering, but he
Mhm,
also has the circle, the person in his life that when things get hard, when we don't have it in us, that's when we need someone else to stand in the gap for us. That is
mhm.
going to be your cheerleader. That is going to be your supporter. There you have it. Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yes. So I want to get on reinvention. What
Mm,
does reinvention mean to you?
yes. Well, reinvention to me means letting go of
Mm,
the old stuff, right? Whether again it's mindsets, behaviors, and it's replacing it
mhm,
with what will serve you, right? Um, you actually, by the time you're on the other side, you're actually unrecognizable
mhm,
because there is an actual transformation that takes place. But with reinvention, it's also an ongoing. So it's not a one and done. It's a constant evolution, you know? But that's what reinvention uh, means to me. Yeah. And there is definitely a process there that needs to take place. So when you think about, remember, I don't know if you remember, you might be too young. Remember Kodak? Remember that when they
Oh
used
yeah,
to,
the camera the film company.
yes, or even
Yeah.
just back in the day, the way we processed film,
Mhm,
it's got to go through that dark process. But that film, once it's done, like what comes out on the other side is unrecognizable. So that's kind of the analogy that I use, or the butterfly. But that for me is reinvention. Yeah.
and it's funny you talked about Kodak because Kodak as a brand had to reinvent themselves too, because once the 35 millimeter and 110 film went away,
Mhm.
some people listening to this are probably gonna be like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." But once it went away and there was no longer this need for film as things went more digital, Kodak was actually able to reinvent themselves, not just from like a film to, and they started to do cameras and moving into that space. And then there's, is it Kodak or is this other one that ended up moving into the space for like virtual, no, what was it, contract, like employee management, and they were ended up bringing in people as contract workers to fill in with business, and then they ended up doing business systems and stuff. So I can't remember if it was Kodak or another one, but there was, I know Kodak ended up reinventing themselves into the digital camera space, and then they ended up doing like digital printers and a bunch of other stuff in terms of company reinvention. And you're right, it's like we have to reinvent ourselves too, depending on what's going on in the environment, depending on what's going on inside of us. We have to reinvent ourselves. I think about when I first became an entrepreneur. I started a financial literacy company. I was a single woman in corporate, and I was managing a $1 billion budget, but yet my finances were ridiculous. I'm like, how is it? I started asking myself, like, how is it possible that I am managing a $1 billion budget. I've done $100 million restructuring deals, but yet my finances are a mess. I'm like, this makes zero sense. And so I went on this journey to transform my finances, which interestingly I found was more emotional and less technical. So I had to start to heal myself inside before I was able to transform how I manage my money. And then I ended up starting a business related to that. But then when I became a single mom and I realized that I was having challenges managing my money as a single mom, I felt like it destroyed my self-worth. And I'm like, how is it that I'm sitting up here? I've been featured in Essence and all these other places about money, and my personal finances are a hot mess. And then the Lord was just like, well, if it's hard for you, why don't you start teaching single moms how to manage their money? If you had the education and background and you're running into obstacles, imagine how someone else feels who doesn't even have that same knowledge base. And so I was able to reinvent myself and pull myself out of that, how you just kind of like beat yourself up, right? And so I was able to pull myself out of that, reinvented the company to focus on financial literacy for single moms. But then as I was going through that process of healing, I really hit a brick wall and just shut down completely. And it was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. And then once the Lord began to work on me and heal me, he said, okay, I have something different for you now. And so it was helping single moms to create their exit strategies from corporate so they can walk in purpose and spend more time with their kids and to be able to do the work that the Lord has called them to do. And so I'm kind of like, I don't know about this. Last time I tried to work with single moms, all it did was bring up pain. And then he said, okay, but you're healed, you're further along on your healing journey. It's okay. And so I said, yes. And then as I began to work with single moms creating their exit strategies, one of the things, which is why I asked you the question in the beginning, that I started to realize was I can't talk to a single mom about walking in purpose if they don't understand that they have a purpose or what that purpose is. And so it's just interesting, even as I feel like the Lord is reinventing me, he's reinventing my business, but at the core of it, still pointing people back to him. And so when you start talking about more and reinvention, I was just like, it's super excited.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I love to hear what you're doing and how you're trusting the process, like letting God lead you through it. I'm in the same situation right now where my business has been reinventing itself as I go through my own again journey, because like I said, it's not a one and done. We're constantly evolving as God is refining us, as he's stretching us, we're getting more clarity, right? So things keep evolving within us, and then it ends up being a reflection in our business and what we're purposed to do. So yeah, I can absolutely relate. And it all goes back to purpose at the end of the day, what his purpose plans are. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, because one of the things that I think people can make the mistake of is when we experience a traumatic event, we can begin to internalize this as if it's a reflection on us and who we are. And we can lose the fact that God is the one who created us. God is the one who gives us value. God is the one who gives us worth. So if someone else doesn't recognize our worth and our value, that does not change who we are. And it took me a while to be able to understand that. At first, I thought, oh, well, because he walked out, it must be something wrong with me. Oh, because I dealt with workplace bullying for 2.5 years. Oh, it must be something wrong with me. And so it didn't help that him walking out came after the whole workplace bullying thing, because I really started to think, wow, two different situations, different people. It really must be something wrong with me. And it impacted how I showed up. And even when I was in business, it impacted how I felt that I could serve my clients, because as I served my clients, what was in the back of my mind this whole time was the words of, my twin dad was, you're going to fail. You're going to, he was just like, you're going to fail. No one will ever want you. All you do is hurt people. You'll never succeed as an entrepreneur, and you'll just hurt the clients that you serve because all you do is hurt people. And so all because I refused to have an abortion. So that made me a horrible human being, right? So so that all came after I said, I'm not terminating my pregnancy. Then all of a sudden I became the worst person in the whole wide world. And so, but the thing is, I knew that like mentally, right? I knew that had nothing to do with me. That was all him. But emotionally, I took those words on and I stopped showing up because for me, because I have a good heart, I'm a good person, I didn't want to hurt people. And so I'm just like, wait a second. So that must mean that in order for me not to hurt people, that means I need to shut my business down. Like I can't do this anymore. And so it became a process to even learn how to value myself again, value my gifts again, believe that I had a purpose, and that believing that that purpose wasn't going to hurt somebody else. And to begin to recognize that my value isn't dictated by someone else's opinions of me or their thoughts of me, but it really comes from God. And so, yeah, it's interesting as I've reflected upon my own healing journey, how that has shaped my interactions with my clients and really moved from being like, okay, let's talk about your finances to let's build you up as a woman, as a mom, as a person, because we all need that if we're going to walk truly in who God has created us to be.
Absolutely. Wow. What a powerful story and what you overcome. Because those words, yeah, they hurt. They're like daggers. But I just want to acknowledge you for your strength and courage around all of that and getting to the point where you can recognize that that's not about me. That's about him. You know, I have a very different experience in that, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. So I thank God for this, right? So my pastor, when it happened, when my husband left, I shared it with my pastor. He actually had done our marriage counseling, and he was both very well, And the first thing he said to me, and that's why I thank God, right? When you have the right people in your life, he said, Dionne, just know that this is not a reflection of you or your worth. So I had that from the beginning to attach to. You see how powerful words are?
Yep.
They can be daggers or they can actually be the wind under your wings. So I thank God I got that message on the outset. You know what I mean? See how powerful just how words are and can shape the narrative of your life, right? So luckily I had that to anchor me. Don't get me wrong. It's not always easy. There are times where you are questioning yourself, why me? But then it's remembering to turn that why to what. When you're in these moments, if you take nothing else away from this conversation today, when you are in the thick of it, when you're in the midst of it, instead of saying why God or why me, because that just keeps you stuck in the spiral of woe is me, right? The minute you change it to what, that one word, what is the meaning of this moment? What am I supposed to learn from this? The minute you just switch that to a more empowering question, it takes it off of, there's something wrong with me, but actually there's a bigger purpose for why this is happening in the moment. So I'm hoping that supports someone based on this quick interaction right here that, in the moments when you want to start questioning, there's got to be something broken in me. And I'm not saying that there isn't work to be done on our end. So when we are attracting certain things into our lives, rather than blaming the other person, because that is a way for us to take ourselves off the hook from actually looking within to see where there might be some work to do on my end, but not to let the negative words of other people, take away from who we really are. you know?
Absolutely.
And I'm going to give you one more just around this topic, because again, I say words are so powerful, you know? So if if this is any reminder to anyone out there, that I tell myself every day, I cannot afford to not see myself the way God sees me.
Absolutely. That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. And see, everyone, this is why you need to get your all access replay, because this right here will transform your life once you start applying it. What? And you cannot afford to not see yourself the way God sees you. So this is super powerful. So what I want to ask you is that, how did you move from that pain to being able to get to a place where you can walk in purpose?
Sure. I have quite the journey. Do we have enough time? I was like, where do I start? But I will say this. So I was with actually my son's father for 17 years. We were college sweethearts. I'm going to start at the real beginning, you know? And unfortunately, there was infidelity. I really wanted our relationship to work. I wanted my son to have both parents. I wanted to have, the 2-parent household, all that good stuff. I didn't have that growing up. Unfortunately, my dad dealt with mental health issues, and so my mom raised the 4 of us. So that was something I really wanted for my life. But unfortunately, I did have to eventually walk away from the relationship. And I feel a lot of it at that time was what my mother modeled for me. So a lot of it just seemed innately within me. Something told me, I knew I had to eventually, I said, it's got to be better than this. So a lot of times it has to get so bad, right, for you to really make that plunge. So that's where I got to. I knew I had to just physically physically shift my space. I actually went back to Canada. I'm originally from Canada.
Oh,
went to
wow.
Toronto to be closer to family. I said, if I'm not with him anymore, and most of my family is in Toronto. So that was a big thing, that getting out of the environment, physically changing your environment can do wonders. And you can even use this in your everyday daily life when you're in a difficult conversation at work or something, just physically changing your space. So for me, I actually left the country. I went and surrounded myself again around positive, loving family and friends, right? And with that said, I innately, somehow I knew it was best for me to forgive.
That's good.
I'm not sure where that came from, but I spontaneously forgave him.
Wow, that was powerful.
Before he was even ready to accept the apology. Like, he couldn't even take it in, because he of course now is remorseful for the decisions that he made. So it's like he couldn't even take in my apology. I'm sorry, my forgiveness at the time, but I knew it was better for me to be able to release and forgive, so I can allow what God knew that he wants to bring into my life. So that really helped, because it allowed me to, again, focus on, the new career I wanted to create, not harboring the negative stuff. I was able to go into really beautiful relations. I was able to date and actually meet really lovely men, and actually experience being courted and all the things that I felt I kind of didn't have eventually with him, so I was able to welcome good. And that was one of the things I said when I left him. I said, I deserve good love.
Right.
So I was able to actually attract, really nice relationships while I was in Canada. And so that was huge. Forgiveness, changing my location, surrounding myself with good people. And then you won't believe it, but eventually my son's father asked me, Dionne, I'm looking to launch a financial literacy youth program. Will you help me? Now, it's interesting, right around that time, I was actually at a point.
Okay. So, yeah. So you're saying that, believe it or not, you're a child's father.
Yes, believe it or not, he actually reaches out to me and says, Dionne, I'm looking to launch a financial literacy youth program, a nonprofit.
Oh, wow.
Would you help me? Now, it was interesting that right around that time, I was in a place in my life, as I mentioned earlier, I was 40 years old. I was in a singular career for 20 years. I was working in fashion my entire career and a single mom. And I just felt there was more I was supposed to do. And I thought I was going to go back to school and be a kindergarten school teacher. That's where I was. I was actually about to meet up with my son's teacher, kind of get, some direction around it. And that's exactly around the time where he came to me and said, Dionne, would you be willing to launch this nonprofit?
Wow.
And I said, wow. I said, it's still educating. It's still empowering the next generation, just in a different way. And I said, wow, God, okay. That was my first lesson is your gifts don't always come packaged exactly how you expect them to.
Wait,
Right.
how long have you guys been separated at that time?
So at that time, it's probably about 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so I was like, let me think about this, but I went for it. And we co-founded a nonprofit called Financially Clean.
Oh, wow.
And we have now touched thousands of young people, young adults. From that, a 5-star rated podcast was born.
Wow.
Two Black guys with good credit. I've always known I'm supposed to use my voice. So I said, okay, here I am, God. Who knew it was going to be on a podcast? We got signed to a network. Come on, God, like really?
Wow.
But I think it all was it. We were able to rewrite our legacy and rewrite our story. And just imagine this. My son, he's sometimes coming to these classes with and seeing his parents working together to put good into the world.
Wow.
So one day my son, he said, Mom, can you read my essay? He doesn't normally ask me to review his stuff, but he was in middle school at this point. And I read this essay one morning and the tears just started coming to my eyes because of course, I'm sure, most people thought around me, I'm crazy. Why would you go into business with someone who hurt you? You can just imagine all the things, right?
I know. Did you see my face? I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. So, but this is the stuff where God, it doesn't always make sense, right? When it doesn't make sense, but it feels right, that's usually when you're supposed to trust it,
And it shows the power of forgiveness.
And it's the power of forgiveness. Because my son wrote an essay about how when, his parents broke up, his heart shattered in, 10 million pieces, and he was walking along the dark concrete. But now my parents have found a way to work together, even though they're not together. And
Wow.
now my heart has been, healed. So you can imagine that was just confirmation for me that I had done the right thing, And
Wow.
during that time now, I'm back in New York. Eventually, we're actually 360. We're flying back to our hometown of Ottawa, Ontario, to teach our program at the university that he attended.
Wow.
Our hometown. So our podcast, to kick everything off, we did a live podcast taping for the students, right? And at that point, because I'm traveling back and forth to Ottawa, I had an opportunity to actually rekindle my relationship with my father.
Wow.
Because, I didn't have any animosity towards him, but I just didn't really want to necessarily have him in my life. Unfortunately, there was, domestic violence in the house, but I had to finally come to the realization that he wasn't well. And once I came to that realization, again, there was the forgiveness, right?
Wow.
That I was able to invite my mom and my dad to have them both sitting in the front row, which I hadn't had probably since I was a kid when I used to do gymnastics or whatever, to have both my parents cheering me on,
Wow.
So if I hadn't said yes, if I hadn't forgiven, look at all that was. My son met his grandfather for the first time at 13 years old because I forgave and gave my yes. And, it was through the podcast that eventually, because I still didn't feel, like I said, this is still something more I'm supposed to do. And like I said, I could have stayed where I was. It was amazing. You know what I mean? We've got the podcast, we're doing the, but it was like, there's still more I'm supposed to do. And it was through one of our episodes. It seems very basic, cliche, but at the end of the interview, I asked, so any parting words? And she said, well, just to remember to do what makes you happy. Isn't that simple?
Yeah.
But in that space, right, I knew there was something I needed more, as much as this is, I believe in the mission and everything. And it led me to coaching.
Wow.
Yeah. So then next, here I am traveling to DC once a month to immerse myself in this year-long program. I could have waited. I could have done it in New York, but I didn't want to wait that long for that registration. I wanted to see who I was by then.
Right.
The way I got introduced to the concept actually was through my husband. He would allow me to be in his meetings, and I thought, this is fascinating, Next thing you know, his coach posts online, they're looking for new registrants, had a conversation with her. And I thought actually I was just going to use it in the women's empowerment space to facilitate,
right.
Now here I am, a coach dedicated to working with women to live a life of mothers, to working mothers, to live a life of limitless possibility, passion, and purpose, but it's all because I believe a big part of it was the forgiveness,
Right.
Yeah.
The more I even think about forgiveness in the Bible is how forgiveness is tied to blessing. And so I forget what the scripture is, but Jesus said, if you're going to the temple to make a sacrifice and you remember that you pretty much, long story short, if you remember that you hold unforgiveness in your heart towards another brother, leave your sacrifice at the altar, go reconcile, and then come back. And so it's just so interesting, even how he says, Peter saying, how many times do I have to forgive? Well, 70 times 7. Like, what? It's just so serious. And then at some point, he even says, talks about forgive others as he has forgiven you, or forgive others. And forgiveness is the key to being forgiven by God. But forgiveness is hard.
No one says it's easy
because of the pain and the
not easy. But
that's why
that's where, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's why your story is so powerful, because it shows the possibilities. First of all, that forgiveness is possible, but the joy that comes from it.
Yes. And that's it right there. Joy cements it all, right? That's when we can count it all joy, because underlying forgiveness, at the end of the day, it's obedience. And obedience also unlocks your blessing.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
This is powerful. This is so powerful. Looking at my questions, because I'm just like, okay, I'm throwing questions out the window, because this right here is powerful. I'm trying to think what. Okay, I do want to ask this one is because you are a single mom and you have a career. And so what impact do you think that mom guilt or even frustration could have on single moms in impacting their ability to walk in purpose?
Yeah, no, that's rampant, and I've experienced it myself. But one thing I have learned, just from seeing my son, because they are watching us. So if that alone doesn't remind you why it's so important to take care of yourself, we've got to model it for especially our girls and especially our young men, that it's so important to take care of your well-being, right? Because we can be working all day long and making sure we pour into them, and we're constantly being there for them. But if they don't see ourselves being able to receive, to be able to actually take ownership of our self-care, they're going to think all they do is take care of people and all they do is pour out. And then they're wondering why they're exhausted and then why they're strained. So we have to make sure that we're modeling it for our children so they can model it for their children. We can break this cycle of whether it's people pleasing, and all the things, right, that have us depleted and not feeling fulfilled. And we're watching other people around us filling their purpose. We're wondering, well, what about me? But we're too busy taking everybody else's purpose and supporting them and making sure their needs are met, but we're not taking care of ours. So that's a big one. If you want to just make sure you can find a bigger commitment as to why it's so important to make sure we walk on our purpose. That's one of them. Modeling for our kids who are watching us. But yeah, it's real. It can definitely get in the way and tell all the lies as to why, we shouldn't take time to figure it out. But again, if we can remember that we actually all are on assignment. It's a matter of figuring what that assignment is, but we are actually put on this earth to serve. And if we don't, someone's going to miss out. Like if you don't write that song, if you don't, create that medicine, if you don't walk that out, someone misses out. You don't know who needs to hear your story. It may just be you literally just telling your story, but if you don't, someone misses out.
Someone misses out. And I was telling someone the other day, I was going to tell you something else, but it just escaped me just that quickly. But I was just talking to somebody when I was hosting a Bible study. I hosted a live Bible study in the month of February for 25 days. And it was based upon a devotional that I wrote called Chaos to Come. And those were the same scriptures that God used to encourage me during a time where I was stressed out, worried, anxious, and like battling depression. It was just not a good time in my life, just emotionally. And somebody on the Bible study asked me, she said, what do you do? Like, what would you tell somebody who in their life, they cannot point to God's goodness? But she was on the Bible study. So obviously she was looking, she was searching. But she said, how do you encourage someone whose life has just been so hard that it's hard to be able to look back at the things God brought you through? Because I've been saying, look back at what God brought you through. And she said, what if you can't? And I said, at that point, you have to rely on God's character, the stories in the Bible, and get this, the testimonies of other people who made it through the things that you are going through right now. And that's why it's so important for us to be healed. And once we are healed, to share our story, because someone else who's grasping at straws for hope is looking for that story to be able to hold on just a little bit longer until that person gets the deliverance that they seek.
Well said. I got chills when you said that, because that's it. Like, we're actually here. Our testimony is part of the bigger collective transformation. So we have to tell our story. Yeah.
So this is good. I wish I remembered the other question, but when we started talking about testimony, I'm like, whoa, that just jumped into my brain.
Oh, and should we add that without the test, there's no testimony. So it's like when you're in it again, it's just like if you can reframe, like kind of just step back and realize that, the storm isn't always, sometimes it's actually happening for you, not to you, because without the test, you cannot have the testimony.
Yes, you're right. You're right. And it's funny that you mentioned storms, because one song that really helped me get through when I was pregnant, and my pastor was talking about storms. And one of the things he said, never make a permanent decision in temporary circumstances, because a storm is temporary. And then I remember the choir sang a song, and I'm not going to sing because I don't want to subject you guys to that. But the song was, I told the storm to pass, storm you can't last. go away. I command you to move today. Storm, when I speak, storm, you have to leave. And so it gets back to what you were saying about the power of our words and what it is that we speak, because in the song it was talking about, I told the storm to pass, right? And so because Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins, he sent us his Holy Ghost. We have the indwelling of the Holy Ghost inside of us, the Holy Spirit inside of us. And I think back to when Jesus rebuked the wind and the waves had to cease. Power of life is in the power of, what is it? Death and life is in the power.
Life and
Power of
death.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
life
life and
and death
death
in
is
the
in the
power of
power
the
of the
tongue.
tongue. Yeah, it is. And so if we think about this, we are powerful because of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, because of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. So we don't have to sit there in situations and choose. Like at that point, it's choosing to be powerless. But
Yes. Yes.
we can look at the bigger picture, look at what is happening for me. How is God using this to refine me in the refiner's fire, right? Gold is purified by heat. We don't
Diamond,
want the gold
diamond is
before
pressure, right? Like,
pressure,
yeah, of dirt, the stuff nobody else wants, right? But then the
right?
pressure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I'll add the one of the famous, Maya Angelou quotes, that every cloud runs out of rain.
absolutely. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like, what are we doing? The question then becomes, what are we doing in those times to really set us up for a
Ooh,
comeback?
ooh. And I love that, because you were talking about one of your favorite songs. Oh
Uh-huh.
my gosh. One of my favorite songs is I Will Wait on You by Maverick.
Mm,
And there's a chorus where they say, while you're waiting,
mhm,
you could be complaining, but instead I'm gonna be praising
mhm,
and worshiping and praying. So,
mhm.
what are you doing while you wait? So you can
Right.
wait, but while you're waiting, what are you doing?
Right.
Could be complaining, or you could be praising.
Right.
And man, we know the power of some praise and worship, how that can just shift the whole atmosphere. And you can,
Absolutely.
by the time you finish it, you can be literally just in your kitchen, just let that saturate over you while the best thing is just to lay there with your eyes quiet, like, sorry, with your eyes closed. And
Mhm.
just let a song just wash over you. It's amazing, right?
Right.
You are just fully re-energized and just renewing your mind, because that's what God tells us to do, right? Getting in our word and
Right.
renewing our mind. So if you're in your word, you're praying, you're praising, you're worshiping, you can't see it all right now, but that's faith.
Right.
But if in the meantime, with the rain coming down on you, you can still praise and worship, all of a sudden you get that divine download, or God sends the person, your whole vibe, you're vibrating on a whole other level, that you can help but attract something more positive, or allowing God to actually be able to tap in to what he's been trying to share with you, but you were too,
Right.
your mind was too just racing and in the overwhelm, right?
Right.
And there was something you also said too, and I think it's just around um, understanding that the enemy wants you to think you're alone in all of this.
Right.
So when you're hearing other testimonies and saying, "Hey, I'm not the only one," again, that just gives you that extra, wind in your sail to say, "Okay, I'm not alone, and look at her," because the enemy wants you to think you're the
Right.
only one going through it. Mm-hmm.
Right. Because he will kill you and destroy your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe it, if you succumb to it. Like I love that as you were talking about praise and worship, I was thinking about Paul. When Paul was in chains
Mm-hmm.
in jail, like in a deep level of jail, and he just was praising, worshiping, right? And then all of a sudden, an earthquake came and the shackles came off, right? And as I was starting to think about that as you were talking, I'm like, literally, praise can get us out of bondage. Praise can shake the shackles off of us. Because when we go through a traumatic situation, when we go through heartbreak, when we go through disappointment, when we go through storms, it can have the effect of putting us in bondage because we're questioning ourselves. We're questioning who we are. We're questioning if we have a purpose. We're questioning if God's real. It puts us in bondage. But just like with Paul, when we begin to praise, the shackles fall off, the bondage comes off, and we can walk in freedom to be able to be the person that God has called us to be.
Yes.
And so that praise is so powerful, because at that point, when we get to understand it, which is why, plug, we need to get the access, right? So you can rewind this and listen to this. Because when we understand this, we realize that our situations don't determine who we are. People don't determine who we are. It is God. And when we renew our minds in God, and if we can't renew our minds in God, we just praise. And if we can renew our minds in God, we still praise, right?
Woo!
Because that praise
Woo!
gives it just shakes the bondage off of us. It shakes it off. And we don't have to stay in that place anymore. Because again, Dionne, what you were saying is our kids are watching. The reason why we look at generational curses and generational cycles is if our kids don't have anything different to see, what makes us think that they're going to be different? We can want different from them all day long, but if they don't see anything different, then they won't know anything different exists to even want different, unless they happen to be someone who wants to be something different in spite of you, not because of you.
Amen. Wow.
And we don't want that. We don't want that.
We don't want that. And we're not saying not to acknowledge, right?
Right.
Not so that's very prevalent. I come from a Caribbean background, and we don't talk about our business. We may not. We're hardworking. We push through. And maybe not acknowledging. So I'm not saying we don't acknowledge that there is hurt or pain or you're going through things, because we don't want that either. But we want to know we can acknowledge going through, but we can also do the work or what we need to do on our end to change the situation.
And get a good therapist.
That's the healthy balance right there. Yeah.
Yep. I gotta say, Jesus and therapy.
Woo! Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Because Jesus directed me to my wonderful therapist.
Wow. Yeah. It goes hand in hand. And I'm happy that we're seeing that now. It goes hand in hand, because what do we know? Like mind, body, and soul. Like this is fundamental stuff, right? It's fundamental. Right. And when you have all three firing, again, unlimitless possibility and power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So this has been so powerful. Literally, I could talk to you like for a whole another hour.
Oh.
Like this has been this has been so powerful, and it's just amazing to be able to hear where you have been, what you went through, the power of forgiveness. Like the Lord has honestly been ministering to me about the power of forgiveness and the necessity of forgiveness. And it's just so powerful to hear your story about what truly is possible, because I know I'm not the only one who struggles in that area. I know I'm not the only one. So because like, I don't know if you've ever seen the t-shirts that said Jesus forgives, I don't. I literally see t-shirts like that for sale. So like, it's a cultural thing, right? Like where we look at it, and it's baked in culture that you don't forgive. And so forgiving becomes like a surprise, right? It becomes different.
Yeah.
So
in this cancel culture that we live in, yes.
Absolutely. There's no grace whatsoever, right? And so it's just so interesting. And so I just keep like, I don't know why my heart is just being pulled to that. And so I truly hope that throughout this whole conversation, there were so many nuggets, understanding our worth in God, defining ourselves by God, trying to figure out what it is that is going to come out of the situation, focusing on how God is using this for you. But like, listen, ladies, I really want you to understand forgiveness. Because as single mom, and I'm telling you this because of my own personal journey, forgiveness can keep you stuck. Forgiveness can cause you to lose yourself. Forgiveness can impact how you show up. Forgiveness can impact how you allow other people to come into your life. Unforgiveness can cause you to be isolated. And so there's so many blessings that are attached to unforgiveness, but there are so many things that are not good that are attached to unforgiveness. And so, like, we're all single moms for different reasons. Some of us never married, some people divorced, some people single moms by choice, some people are widowed, right? But whatever it is that you're going through, however it is that you came to becoming a single mom, you have to learn how to forgive. I know this one lady she's a single mom, she's a widow. She's having to forgive her deceased husband for leaving because she said that he promised to always be there for her and the kids. And so it's hard for her to acknowledge his death because it reminds her of a broken promise. And so she's having to do forgiveness work with him. There's some people who are having to do forgiveness work towards God because they feel like God took their husband or God, like, so there's so much forgiveness work that needs to happen. I had to do my own forgiveness work, not just towards the twins' dad, but towards the place that I used to work at for workplace bullying, for how they treated me. And I realized that the Lord was calling me with this purpose work with single moms to also help them to create their exit strategies from corporate. These are all using my corporate finance skills, right? But I couldn't even help people with creating their exit strategies and turning their ideas into income because doing the work that I did in corporate finance triggered me because of the pain that I dealt with for 2.5 years. So it blocked me from serving the people who God called me to serve. So I truly, truly, truly hope you understand this message of forgiveness and why it is so important and how it is essential to you moving forward.
And maybe the last thing I'll say on it is there's a point where maybe we don't always have it within us, So during those times, that's when you ask God to give you the strength to forgive, for him to forgive them through you.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of times we think it's always got to be all on us, but that's what he's there for. He wants you to lean on him. So in those moments when you're still struggling with it, maybe you don't have it on your own, but ask God to forgive them through you.
Absolutely.
And forgiveness can look like however it looks for you. So I just want to make sure I put that out there as well. There's no one way to forgive. You may never get the closure that you want and still forgive that person, just by sending them the blessing, that alone, send them peace, send them blessings, right, to their home is huge, right? As a first step in your forgiveness process, for example. Right. So, and that's what scripture says. It's like sending hot coals, but at least it's a step towards forgiveness, because some people, it's different for everyone. For me, it happened to be spontaneous. I just knew innately, this is what's best for me, for my son, and our co-parenting relationship. Right. But for some, it may be more of a struggle. So just want to make sure there's no one way. Right.
Right. And forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation.
Yeah.
For some people, it is reconciliation. For some people, it's not. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to call the person and say, I forgive you. Like, no, doesn't. Yeah, it's your process. It's your process. And there's a book called Forgiving Forward, I think that's what it's called. So I've heard a lot of people also recommend that as well.
And I'll recommend the movie Emmanuel.
Okay.
Yeah, which is based around the church, the mass shooting of a Black Baptist church in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
And Pastor A.R. Bernard was part of the movie. Stephen Curry was one of the executive producers. But the victims of the people who were killed. They didn't expect it, but in that courtroom, one by one, they forgave the shooter.
Wow.
And it was a white shooter who went into a Black church. But it's a powerful movie about the power of forgiveness. So that's another one.
Wow. I'm gonna
Mhm.
check that out.
Yeah.
Sounds really good. Yes. So thank you again, Dionne. Thank
Oh, you're
you.
welcome. Thank
This has been
you.
amazing. You're welcome. So how can the ladies get in contact with you?
Sure. So you can find me at Live Your Best Life for You, all spelled out. That's my website. You can also find me on social media at Dionne Nicholls. And I also have a YouTube channel called Live Your Best Life for You. You just plug in that and my name and I'll pop up. But yeah,
Yes.
that's how you can find me.